Hiring a social media manager when you're not ready will put you out of business. After working with a few thousand businesses and helping them scale to multiple 6, multiple 7 figures, 8, and even 9-figure businesses, they all tend to make the same mistakes because business is really just a series of patterns. And when you can recognize those patterns, you are then able to help scale really any business. So what we've seen is that, number one, most people hire a social media manager way too early. I was on stage with a group of about 50 plus entrepreneurs. All of them were making at least 6 figures. And when I asked them how many of them had a social media manager currently posting content within their business, every single one of them raised their hand. Then I asked them to keep their hand up if they actually liked the content that their social media manager was posting and the content was producing an ROI. So the content was actually turning into sales. And every single person's hand went down except for 2 people. Unfortunately, I was not super surprised by this because almost every single business does this because they're not good at marketing themselves, and marketing is one of the things that most people just don't know how to do when they're starting a business. Usually they are focused in on whatever their product is, whatever their service is, and so the founder is focused on what they think is going to drive the business forward. But ultimately, businesses fail because not enough people know that they exist. And so marketing is the main way that you are going to get people to know that you exist. And handing that off to a social media manager is not going to do that for you because most social media managers are not marketing strategists. They're not CMOs. They don't have the skills. Nothing against them, but they don't have the skills to create a strategy. They don't understand how to do effective market research. They don't know what's going on in your audience's brain, so they don't know what to say in that content to get people to buy. As a founder, no one can talk about your business better than you can. And so even if you're scaling a 9-figure company, you are still going to be and have your hands in marketing. Even if you have a CMO, you are going to have your hands in marketing as the CEO. The other thing that we found is that it's really hard for most founders to manage their social media managers effectively because they don't know what good looks like in that role. And so if you yourself don't understand marketing, you don't know what you need to say to get your audience to buy, and you don't even know what should be happening in the content, a social media manager is not going to do that for you. They are there to manage your social media. They're there to create the content, turn what you're saying and turn your strategy into graphics, into physical pieces of content that are going to go out, and then potentially manage the engagement, respond to comments, respond to DMs, that type of thing. They're not there to set the strategy for your entire business. And what people do is they throw a couple $1,000s, which if you're only making $10,000 to $30,000 a month, putting $2,000 or $3,000 into a social media manager that isn't driving any revenue for your business, you're sinking 10% of your revenue into something that isn't even driving and producing an ROI. So again, most social media managers, they will tell you that they do strategy, but they don't do strategy. They understand tactics, they understand the social media platforms, and so they know how to take a message and turn it into a piece of content. What they don't know how to do is effective market research. They don't know what to say to get your audience to buy. And that's something that's only going to come from you, the founder, learning and achieving those specific skills. A social media manager is there to manage the content calendar, to manage the frequency of posting, to create the graphics, to edit the content and actually post it. They're not there to drive strategy. The other thing is that a lot of founders don't actually know the difference between hiring a social media manager or hiring an agency versus training people in-house, and there is a pretty big difference. And if you don't even know the difference or why you should do one or the other, then you are probably going to make the wrong decision. Hiring and building an in-house team is going to make sense when you're doing over $1 million annually and when you're ready to build IP within your business, really deepen your message and have your hands in every touch point because you have data and stats to back up what is going to be most effective when it comes to your marketing content. So let's talk about what to hire and when. So when you're going from $0 to $100,000 a year, you are the marketing team. And I know that you don't want to hear that. Suck it up, get over it. Do you want to build a business? Do you want to build a successful company? Do you want to have the skills to be able to hire, train, and manage a team effectively in the future? Great. Then you're going to have to learn the basics so that you know what good looks like. So, like I said, 0 to 100,000, you are your own marketing team. You're wearing all the hats, just like you are in every other part of the business. That is what you're doing. This is the time for you to start really understanding your audience, what they care about, what you enjoy talking about, and what your strengths and weaknesses are. Because there's going to be certain things within the marketing process that you are better or worse at, and you need to pay attention to those things, track those things, and start to gather data so that you understand what's happening in your marketing, so that you understand what's happening with your audience, and you understand where your weaknesses are so that you can hire to fill gaps as you continue to scale in the future. Then from $100,000 to $500,000 a year, we are still focused in on founder-led marketing, but you're going to start outsourcing the admin tasks. So these are things like editing, scheduling, but the strategy is going to stay with you. Nobody is going to care more about your business than you are. And so this is the time for you to double down on what's working, start to understand more of the overarching strategy, and start to educate yourself so that you have a deeper understanding of audience and buying behavior, so that you understand what is actually driving those sales for your company. Because as people say, what got you here won't get you there. What got you here, you're going to want to take and cherry pick specific lessons from that data, from that information that you've gathered. Those things, doubling down on them and getting better at them is going to take you to the next level. So from $500,000 to $1 million a year, we're still doing founder-led strategy, but we're probably going to bring in some more junior support. That's going to look like giving somebody more responsibility within your marketing. This could be the point where you actually do hire a social media manager, but you are still driving all of the strategic decisions. They're going to be able to step in more because you're going to be hiring for a higher level role. They're going to be able to step in more and advise you and kind of help you. Maybe if you're bouncing ideas off of them with strategy, they'll be able to take a more holistic role in managing all of your different platforms. At this point, you'll probably be posting on multiple platforms, creating different forms and styles of content. So they can take what's already worked from the past. You set the overarching strategy, and then they're able to kind of come in and execute on those things at a little bit higher level than the junior support from before. So the difference between 500 to $1 million versus 1 to 5 is in that 1 to 5, you're really just outsourcing tasks. So you're giving them editing to do, you're giving them scheduling to do. You're still basically doing everything. You're just kind of giving yourself extra hands. The difference when we graduate from 500 to $1 million a year is we're bringing in not necessarily a strategic role, but we're outsourcing. We're going from tasks to responsibility. Now, this is the point where people's marketing tends to nosedive because they bring in this higher level person, and so they think that they can hand off all of the strategy and all of the execution to them. There is a huge difference between delegating and abdicating. And what happens is most people at this phase, they start to abdicate their responsibilities and just push it off onto this person. Now, you want to give them certain responsibilities within the department. So we want them to have specific silos of responsibility that they are bringing to you so that they're making your life easier, but you are still leading the charge here from 500 to $1 million. Now, you'll hear me say this in a lot of videos, but we're going to talk about how it applies here. $1 to $3 million is the absolute worst place to be in business. And so if you're there right now, if you're between $80,000 and like $200,000 a month, I understand what you're going through. And you are not crazy for feeling like it's so much harder to run a business at this level than it was when you were scraping for sales between that like $0 to $100,000 a year. It is so much harder. You're not going crazy. It's very, very difficult. And this is where a lot of businesses get stuck. So I just want to validate that experience that you're having. Now, this is where we start to bring in those strategic hires because we've reached a point of capacity where you no longer know what you don't know. And, you know, as you scale from $0 to $1 million, you're kind of aware of what your gaps are. And so you can typically go after those things and acquire the information. At this point, you probably have no idea what you're missing. And so that's where we need to bring in somebody who has done this before, who can guide you and give you some direction. You're still very much going to be involved with strategy, but we're going to be looking to bring in a higher level person that's able to manage the social media manager and the people that you have on your team. And work in more of a lockstep with you rather than you being in charge of delegation for the entire department. So I always say that $2 million a year is where businesses go to die. And like I said, everyone tends to get stuck here. So this is where you're going to bring in that first strategic hire, but you're going to want to tread very carefully. Again, it can become very tempting because you've brought in a more competent person to start abdicating rather than delegating. And we want to be very mindful that we're not doing that. So what does this look like and how is it different from the $500 to $1 million a year threshold? So this person should understand psychology. They should understand buyer behavior. They should understand basically how to read your data and adapt and understand what to say to get people to buy. They should know all of that, and they'll need to come in and learn your company inside and out. The skills that they need to have is to be that first layer of management. So you are no longer communicating with the video editors and talking to the social media manager. You are talking to this person. So this person is kind of going to roll things up to you. They'll set more of the strategy and bring it to you for final approval. So you're still going to be very involved in this process. Your role is just going to shift from manager into a little bit more of a trainer. So you're there to provide feedback and basically be quality control for your marketing department. I should also say that typically that $1 to $3 million a year person is going to be an external hire. Think fractional CMO vibes, or potentially a high-level agency that understands strategy and is able to execute on your behalf. Then we get to the fun part, which is 3 to 5 million. And this is where we get to start building out a more thorough in-house marketing team. So you move from trainer to director in this part of your business, and it's really great because you are still involved in the strategy, but they're able to kind of bring things to you and you're able to say yes or no, this is what we're doing. It's not all on your shoulders. And so what we've done is we've slowly moved up the ladder from delegating admin, delegating tasks, delegating responsibility, to then delegating the entire department. Again, we're not abdicating. We're still looking at metrics. We're still tracking data. We are still very much have our hands in, and you're probably still creating content as the founder, but all of the thinking and the mental load has been outsourced and you're making the final decisions. Also, from 1 to 3 and 3 to 5 is where your data and your tracking is going to get a lot more important. So you might consider actually bringing someone into your business, or if the agency is able to do that for you, that's going to have much higher level data tracking so that you are able to have a deeper understanding of attribution, what things are working and what things don't work, and really understand what your gaps are, because this is where we're getting to the place where it's no longer about just creating more and better content. We're actually getting to the place where we really need to understand your metrics all the way across your funnel so that we know and can pinpoint exactly what is working and what isn't, so that we can make those tiny micro adjustments within your funnel that's going to maximize your conversion. So for example, right, it's not just enough to know how many link clicks we're getting and how many people are booking, right? Prior, that might have been okay, but now we need to understand, is the gap where our content is not actually converting to our profile? Is our profile not converting? Do we need to tweak and optimize there? Is there something that we're saying in our call to action or our bio that's kind of breaking trust? Is there something that's happening on the main landing page that's breaking trust? Why is that metric so much lower than it was last month? What did we change? What did we do, right? This is where those super micro things come in, where we're trying to tweak and maximize and get the most out of the funnel that we currently have. So up until this point, we know that this process is working. We're able to move sales from one end of the funnel to the other, from discovery to purchase. But this is where we're able to bring in and really pinpoint what's going on. And those higher level hires that you're bringing into your business are going to be key in helping you do that. Then from 5 to 10 million, typically what you're going to be doing is bringing in different marketing modalities. So if you have primarily been creating content organically, then maybe this is where we start bringing in ad spend, right? You can do that a little sooner depending on your skill level with marketing, right? But there's different things that you'll want to start tweaking and bringing in, and that will just fully diversify and build out the rest of your marketing department, because you will have a lot of people in different roles, from market research to actual content production, editing, planning. You'll have a lot of different people. So instead of having just like 2 or 3 people that are in charge of the entire marketing department, you'll start to really develop each of these individual roles. You'll have people that are specifically in charge of tech, editing, creating graphics. Every single silo of content creation will start to be filled out. You'll start to have roles for every person rather than each person taking on multiple roles at that level. Big takeaways here: until you hit $1 million, your founder focused marketing is probably going to be the biggest lever that you can pull. And then beyond $1 million, so like 1 to 5, that's where you're going to be bringing in more of the strategic development hires. But the biggest thing that you are going to be focusing on basically for the entirety of the time is leading and setting the strategy for the department. So hiring a social media manager, which is what most people, their knee-jerk reaction is, especially once they hit about 100K in revenue, their knee-jerk reaction is, let me bring somebody in, it'll be so great, I will just have them do all of my content and I'll just make as much money as I am. And then you're shocked when your sales start plummeting. You as the founder need to be involved in strategy. Apple, I know you're familiar, multi-billion dollar company. Steve Jobs was always involved in marketing. In fact, that was one of the few things that he was involved in. So you're never too good to be involved in marketing. You're never too busy. You're never making too much revenue. Marketing is the lifeblood of your business. If people don't know that you exist, you're not going to. If you are a founder that is scaling beyond $100,000 in revenue, you're scaling to 7 figures, then it's probably about time for you to sit down with somebody who really understands your marketing and sales data even better than you do, so that they can assess the gaps and pinpoint exactly what those things are that you are missing as a founder-led brand to be able to scale to the next level. So if you want our team's eyes on your information, on your marketing, on your sales data, go ahead and book a free gap assessment at the link down below, and our team is so excited to dive into it with you.